What is the most terrifying power human beings possess?
Oh, wow. Starting off light today, I see.
Right. But seriously, if just pause to consider it for a second, it isn't our ability to split the atom, or to flatten mountains, or even to rewrite our own genetic code.
Yeah, those are all massive, but they aren't the baseline.
Exactly. The most terrifying power we hold is the sheer, uncompromising asymmetry of our agency.
The asymmetry, that is a great way to put it.
We walk through our days wielding this absolute, basically godlike power to permanently end a complex system, but we possess absolutely zero capacity to spark it back into existence from nothing.
Right, and that asymmetry, it really defines the entirety of our existence. Yet, we go to enormous lengths to avoid confronting it directly.
We really do. We abstract it away.
We have to. We navigate the physical world treating the animate beings around us as if they were, I don't know, renewable resources or manufactured commodities. Because
Hmm.
staring directly at the sheer irreversible finality of our destructive capacity is just psychologically paralyzing.
It really is. And, well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a very different kind of mission.
A very focused mission.
Yeah, extremely focused. We have a foundational document in front of us today, the Peaceful World Manifesto version 1.0.
Heavy text.
Very heavy. But we are not going to do our usual broad overview. We aren't looking at the macro level policy suggestions or the sweeping societal critiques.
No, we are zooming way, way in.
Right. We are placing a single isolated paragraph under the most intense philosophical microscope we have. We are looking exclusively at point one.
Which is located in a section called The Foundation of Being.
Exactly. And it is titled The Sanctity of Life, the Expanding Circle Principle.
It's a rigorous exercise to restrict our focus to just these few lines, but it is entirely necessary.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is a specific paragraph so critical?
Because this single paragraph acts as the ethical bedrock for everything that follows in the manifesto. I mean, it presents an impossibly dense philosophical framework in just a few sentences.
It takes like 30 seconds to read.
Right. But if you do not completely dismantle and understand the concepts within this specific point, like how it defines value, how it confronts human power, and how it aligns ethics with the actual physical forces of the universe, then the rest of the manifesto is just noise.
It's the operating system for the whole philosophy. So I want to read the opening sentence because it immediately initiates this massive philosophical maneuver.
It really doesn't waste any time.
It says, whether we see life as a divine design, a miracle of evolution, or a unique phenomenon of the universe, we recognize it as the highest value.
Yeah, let's look at how we even begin to assign value to something as nebulous as life.
Hmm.
Historically, the default human mechanism for valuing anything, especially life, is completely tethered to its origin story.
Right, the origin story is everything. Like, where did this come from?
Exactly. The origin story has always been the prerequisite for moral consideration. For millennia, a theological framework argued that life has value strictly because it is the property of a creator.
And then on the flip side, you have the secular view.
Right. A secular or materialist framework might argue that life has value because of the sheer statistical improbability of biological evolution, or the shared struggle for survival.
Or even a cosmic perspective, seeing it as this bizarre emergent anomaly in an otherwise cold, dead universe.
Yeah, but what the text does right here, in the very first sentence, is establish an aggressive kind of origin agnosticism.
Origin agnosticism. I like that phrase. It lists those three major metaphysical paradigms, the divine, the evolutionary, and the cosmic, and then immediately treats them all as entirely irrelevant to the final valuation.
It literally says, it doesn't matter. It is severing the why it's here from the what it's worth.
That detachment is a profoundly strategic ethical decision by the authors. By establishing this origin agnosticism, the text confronts a brutal historical reality.
Which is that human beings have never, and likely will never, reach a unanimous global consensus on the metaphysical how of our existence.
We just won't. People have been fighting wars over it for thousands of years.
Right. So if an ethical framework requires everyone to agree on the origin story before they agree on the value of life, that framework is doomed. It's doomed to generate perpetual conflict.
It's a non-starter.
Exactly. The text sidesteps that trap entirely. It focuses solely on the present reality. Regardless of the metaphysical path you took to arrive at the present moment, the destination is identical.
It's like we're all arriving at the peak of the same mountain. It doesn't really matter which trail you hiked to get up here. The view from the top is identical. Life is the highest value.
That's a great way to visualize it.
But, I see the utilitarian value in that approach, but I have to push back a little.
Mhm.
Does stripping away the how actually make it easier for people of conflicting worldviews to agree on the what?
What do you mean?
Let's stress test this. A deeply religious individual values life because they believe it holds a divine spark, right? A
Yes.
soul tethered to eternity. And a scientific materialist values life as a fleeting, localized biological process that ceases entirely at death. Those are fundamentally different operational definitions of highest value. Are we simply papering over a massive philosophical chasm and pretending the bridge is solid?
Well, that is the core vulnerability of an agnostic framework. It's a totally valid critique.
Yeah.
However, the text wagers that the visceral, immediate reality of life itself exerts a heavier gravitational pull than the theoretical frameworks we build around it.
Give me an example of that gravitational pull.
Consider a crisis scenario. A building is burning, and there are people trapped inside.
Okay.
The individuals rushing in to save them do not pause at the threshold to cross-examine each other on their theological or evolutionary beliefs.
Right, they don't stop and say, "Excuse me, do you believe in Darwin or intelligent design before I hand you this fire hose?"
Exactly. The instinctual drive to preserve life bypasses the intellectual debate regarding its origin.
The burning building is a crucial thought experiment. You don't ask how the fire started to value the people inside it. The urgency of the present overrides the debate of the past.
Precisely. And the text is attempting to codify that exact instinct into a permanent philosophical stance. It is demanding that you recognize that the shared baseline holding life as the highest value is infinitely more critical to our survival than standardizing the vocabulary we use to justify it.
It's really asking you, the listener, to do something difficult. Imagine sitting across from someone whose core beliefs about the origin of the universe are the exact polar opposite of your own,
Right, someone you fundamentally disagree with on almost everything.
and realizing that you both still share this absolutely non-negotiable baseline value. That requires a massive shift in cognitive posture.
It really does. It requires abandoning the need to be right about the past in order to be responsible for the present.
And that responsibility brings us to the operational reality of that value, which circles back to the asymmetry we opened the show with. Let's look at the very next line of the manifesto.
This is where it gets heavy.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text defines life as the only miracle we are capable of destroying, but incapable of recreating.
What's fascinating here is how we need to scrutinize the word miracle. Because in an actively agnostic text that just literally sidestepped divine origins, it clearly isn't being used in the supernatural sense.
No, not at all. It is using miracle as a metric of absolute irreproducibility.
Yes. It is a description of a state of complexity that, once unschooled, cannot be wound back up by any human mechanism.
To understand this, contrast it with human technology. We can manufacture incredibly complex systems, right? We can build quantum computers. We can launch satellites into deep space.
We can engineer massive artificial intelligence networks.
But if a quantum computer is smashed into pieces, we simply source new materials and build another one. We possess the blueprints. We have the capability to recreate the complexity from scratch.
Exactly. Or like burning down a library.
Yeah.
I burn down a building, we can rebuild it. The books can be reprinted. But a biological life, even the most rudimentary single-celled organism, let alone a complex sentient creature, operates on a level of integrated complexity that completely defies our capacity for recreation.
We hold the power of absolute ending with zero power of beginning.
Zero. When a life is extinguished, an entire subjective universe, an entire unique perspective, is permanently deleted from reality.
I really want to lean into the psychological weight of that. Because if we were to truly internalize that level of asymmetry, if I were to walk around hyper-aware that every insect on the sidewalk, every animal in the forest, every human being I interact with is a fragile, irreproducible miracle, that I possess the physical capacity to end but zero capacity to restart,
It would be paralyzing.
it would be an incredibly heavy burden. So let me ask you, do we build abstract ethical frameworks or economic systems that commodify life precisely to shield ourselves from that crushing responsibility?
Oh, it's almost certainly a psychological defense mechanism. To live in a state of hyper-awareness regarding the fragility of everything around you requires an emotional endurance that most people simply do not possess.
So we numb ourselves.
We abstract the miracle away. We turn lives into statistics. We turn animals into inventory. We turn conflicts into geopolitical chess matches.
We shrink the reality of life down into these abstract concepts so that it fits inside our heads without completely overwhelming our nervous systems.
We use callousness as a necessary shield against our own terrifying power.
But this manifesto, this specific paragraph, is effectively demanding that we drop the shield.
It is demanding that we look directly at the asymmetry.
It is telling us that because we possess the terrifying power to permanently end a miracle we cannot replicate, we are not the masters of life. We are its most dangerous variable.
Which naturally dictates that we must be strictly governed. You cannot possess that magnitude of asymmetrical destructive capability without an equally powerful ethical constraint.
Right. The realization of our power forces a change in behavior. If you are holding a priceless, one-of-a-kind artifact in your hands, your entire physical posture changes.
You move with deliberate care.
And that deliberate care is exactly what the text attempts to formalize in the next sentence. It calls for experiencing reverence for life as a moral absolute. And it brackets this entire concept under the title, The Expanding Circle Principle.
Let's start with the friction point here, claiming a moral absolute.
Yeah, because we live in a heavily contextualized world. We are constantly taught that ethics are situational, that morality is fluid, and depends entirely on cultural or environmental variables.
To plant a flag and claim a moral absolute is a highly disruptive philosophical move today.
It is intentionally disruptive. A moral absolute is not a guideline, and it is not a best practice that you apply when it is convenient.
No, it is a fixed navigational star. The text is arguing that while many human constructs are relative, our economic theories, our political borders, our social customs, the fundamental reverence for life cannot be subject to relativity.
Because the moment reverence becomes relative, it becomes a tool for justification.
Exactly.
If reverence for life is negotiable, you open the door to saying, well, life is the highest value unless that life belongs to a competing nation.
Or unless that life stands in the way of resource extraction.
Or unless that life is a different species entirely.
Relativity is the mechanism by which human beings historically justify atrocities. A moral absolute locks that door. It removes the loophole completely.
And the choice of the word reverence is critical here too. Reverence carries a much heavier psychological weight than mere respect or tolerance.
Oh, absolutely. Respect is often transactional. I respect you so that you will respect me, but reverence implies a deep, profound recognition of the inherent, irreproducible value of the other.
It dictates a posture of awe. You simply do not harm what you revere.
But this brings us to the core tension of the paragraph, which is the title concept, the expanding circle principle.
Right. A circle, by definition, has a boundary. If the reverence for life is a moral absolute, why is it contained within a circle that needs expanding?
That implies there are currently entities outside the circle that are not receiving that reverence.
Which is the paradox of human moral evolution.
The text acknowledges our biological and historical reality. Our capacity for empathy, historically, does not start out as universal. It starts infinitesimally small.
It begins with the self.
Then it slowly pushes outward to encompass the immediate family, those who share our genetic material. From there, it expands to the tribe, the local community, the people who share our language and immediate resources.
It's an empathy of proximity and similarity. It's incredibly easy to have a moral absolute of reverence for a cute puppy or loved one. That is an instinct. But the true test of a moral framework isn't how it treats the center of the circle.
No, it's how it handles the perimeter.
Think about how your own circle has expanded over your lifetime. I mean, you, the listener. Who is inside it now that wasn't 10 years ago?
The expanding circle principle suggests that the measure of our ethical maturity is our willingness to continuously push that boundary outward against the friction of our tribal instincts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the historical progression. Centuries ago, the idea that individuals from a different continent or a different social class deserved equal moral consideration was a fringe, radical concept.
The circle was tightly contracted and violently defended. Through philosophy, struggle, and profound cognitive shifts, the human circle expanded to theoretically encompass all humanity.
But the text is stating that the expansion cannot stop at the boundary of our own species. It frames the expansion as an active, ongoing obligation.
The moment you stop expanding the circle, you inherently begin defending its current borders. And defending a border inevitably requires utilizing that asymmetrical destructive power against whoever is left on the outside.
The commitment to the moral absolute is the commitment to the expansion itself. It requires you to look at the entity standing just outside your current threshold of empathy and ask a very difficult question.
What artificial intellectual barrier have I constructed that allows me to deny you reverence?
This represents a massive shift from a defensive posture to an absorptive posture. Instead of protecting a small enclave of empathy from a hostile world, the goal is to systematically absorb the hostile world into the enclave.
And this shift leads us to what is undoubtedly the most dense, challenging, and frankly mind-bending assertion in this entire text.
The peak of the deep dive.
Yes, the Manifesto states that by experiencing this reverence, we affirm the position of biocentrism and syntropy, the force that orders chaos.
This is where the text elevates itself from a standard moral philosophy into something resembling an ethical physics. We really need to define these terms strictly within the boundaries the text provides.
Let's start with biocentrism.
Biocentrism is the logical ultimate endpoint of the expanding circle. If you continuously push the boundary of moral consideration past your tribe, past your nation, and eventually past the human species itself, you arrive at the entire biosphere.
You shift from anthropocentrism, where human utility and human comfort are the measure of all value, to a framework where life itself, in all its interconnected forms, is the central pillar of value.
It is the recognition that human beings are not the apex architects of a hierarchy, but rather highly consequential nodes within a vast interdependent web.
But biocentrism alone is still a biological concept. The text anchors it to something far deeper. It anchors it to syntropy.
And the text explicitly defines syntropy for us. It calls it the force that orders chaos. We are no longer just talking about ethics, we are talking about the fundamental thermodynamic realities of the universe.
To grasp the weight of syntropy, we have to talk about its inverse, which is entropy.
Entropy is the foundational law of physical reality. It is the observable truth that all closed systems naturally degrade over time.
Energy dissipates, heat cools, solid structures erode. The universe has a natural, inexorable drift toward chaos, disorder, and uniform decay.
Without the continuous application of energy, everything breaks down. So imagine a magnificent, intricate sandcastle built on a beach.
Entropy is the wind, the tide, the shifting of the earth.
Right. If left entirely alone, the sandcastle will not become more complex. It will inevitably crumble back into a flat, featureless stretch of sand. The universe naturally erodes complexity.
But then there's the phenomenon of life. Life is the ultimate localized rebellion against the law of entropy.
Wait, really? A rebellion?
Think about it. A living cell does the exact opposite of what the universe dictates. It takes chaotic, disorganized matter and energy from its environment and meticulously synthesizes it into incredibly complex, purposeful, highly structured patterns.
Life builds.
Life repairs. Life constantly works to maintain intricate order against the crushing weight of cosmic decay.
So if the universe is a messy room constantly trying to get messier, life is the force actively cleaning it up and organizing it. Life is the force constantly rebuilding the sandcastle.
Exactly. So let's connect this back to the ethics of the text.
What?
The Manifesto claims that by experiencing reverence for life, we affirm the position of syntropy.
It is making a profound conceptual leap. It is arguing that our ethical choices are not just social constructs. By affirming syntropy, are we basically saying that to protect life is to literally fight back against the breakdown of the universe?
Yes, it is arguing that our ethical choices are physical forces. When we choose to act with cruelty, when we destroy, when we inflict violence, we are not just failing a moral test, we are acting as agents of entropy.
We are actively taking complex, irreproducible systems, living beings, and accelerating their breakdown into dead, chaotic matter. We are aiding the decay of the universe.
That is a staggering reframing of human behavior. It means that when I act with empathy, when I protect a vulnerable creature, when I choose to preserve a habitat rather than pave it, I am not merely being a good person according to a cultural standard.
I am literally operating as a localized conduit for syntropy. I am applying force to order the chaos.
It elevates the preservation of life from a mere social courtesy to a cosmic imperative. Compassion, healing, and stewardship are reframed as acts of profound physical resistance.
You are aligning your human agency with the only force in the known universe capable of fighting back against the dark, entropic drift. Your empathy is the mechanism of order.
I really want the listener to sit with that idea. If you accept the logic of this paragraph, your daily interactions are no longer just sociological events.
Every single choice you make is a binary decision between feeding the chaos or feeding the order. It places an immense, almost unbearable level of consequence on human behavior.
Which is why the final sentence of this paragraph is so vital. It directs this immense cosmic responsibility toward a specific, actionable horizon.
The text states, "We recognize the value of every sentient being and strive for a world free of cruelty."
Let's dissect the phrase every sentient being. The text doesn't say every living cell. It doesn't advocate for the reverence of a virus or a blade of grass in the same way it does for a complex organism.
Right, it draws the final boundary of the expanding circle at sentience.
Sentience is the critical threshold. It is the capacity for subjective experience. It is the ability to perceive, to feel pain, to experience distress, or to experience joy.
If an entity is sentient, it means there is someone inside experiencing the friction of existence. If an entity can suffer, it is a localized node of syntropy experiencing the threat of entropy.
To exclude a sentient being from your circle of reverence simply because it operates on a different biological operating system, because it has fur or scales or communicates differently, is an arbitrary failure of the moral imagination.
It is a refusal to recognize the miracle in a different packaging.
And this recognition culminates in the ultimate mandate, to strive for a world free of cruelty. We have to analyze the specific vocabulary here.
Because a world free of cruelty sounds inherently utopian. It sounds like a naive, impossible dream when juxtaposed against the brutal reality of the global food chain, resource scarcity, and human history.
It does sound utopian if you view it as a static destination that we are supposed to magically arrive at. But the text uses a very specific active verb.
It does not say we declare a world free of cruelty, or we mandate a world free of cruelty. It says we strive for it.
Striving is the operational word. You do not strive for something that is easy or inevitable. Striving implies massive resistance.
It implies pushing an immense weight up a steep incline. To strive for a cruelty-free world is to fully acknowledge that cruelty is deeply embedded in our biological history and our current systems, but to categorically refuse to accept that it is an inescapable permanent condition.
Cruelty, in the context of everything we've discussed, is the unnecessary conscious acceleration of entropy. It is the deliberate infliction of chaos and suffering upon a sentient being.
So what does this all mean? To strive against it means engaging in a continuous, grueling process of minimizing that acceleration wherever human agency has influence.
And that influence is ubiquitous. This philosophy does not wait for geopolitical treaties or sweeping legislative changes. The striving occurs in the microscopic, mundane moments of daily life.
It means every time you make a choice that reduces cruelty, whether it's a purchasing decision that avoids a supply chain built on suffering, or how you manage a conflict with a neighbor, or how you treat an animal, you are actively participating in syntropy.
It is the conscious, moment-by-moment refusal to add unnecessary chaos to the system.
It is the realization that a cruelty-free world is not built top-down. It is synthesized bottom-up by billions of individual daily choices to act syntropically.
Every time you choose to de-escalate, every time you choose to preserve rather than extract, you're actively manufacturing that world. You are striving.
This raises an important question. This is the ultimate burden of the paragraph. If you internalize this text, if you truly accept origin agnosticism, if you face the terrifying asymmetry of your destructive power, if you recognize your empathy as a force of cosmic order, and if you expand your circle to include all sentient life, how can you possibly wake up tomorrow and interact with the world in the exact same way you did today?
You can't. It demands a total cognitive rewrite. It demands moving from a paradigm of extraction to a paradigm of profound stewardship.
Let's trace the arc of what we've unpacked here today, because we have pulled an entire ethical universe out of a handful of sentences. We began by observing how the text brilliantly neutralizes historical conflict through origin agnosticism, forcing us to value the destination of life regardless of the metaphysical path taken to get here.
We then explore the harsh reality of our power asymmetry. The fact that we are capable of permanently ending the irreproducible miracle of life, yet completely incapable of recreating it, which necessitates a strict, unyielding moral framework.
That framework manifested as a moral absolute of reverence, governed by the expanding circle principle, the constant active obligation to push our empathy past the borders of our tribe, our nation, and our species.
Which led us to the deepest realization of all, biocentrism and syntropy. The understanding that human empathy is not just a polite social construct, but a literal organizing force resisting the entropic decay of the universe.
All of which points us toward the relentless, daily striving to eliminate cruelty against every sentient being capable of suffering. I want to emphasize to you, the listener, that this deep dive is not meant to be just a passive intellectual exercise.
No, the expanding circle is not a geometric theory. It is the boundary of your own mind.
You possess total control over where that boundary is drawn. You are the one who decides today whether to push it outward just a fraction of an inch further.
If we follow the logic of syntropy to its absolute conclusion, it leaves us with a profound final consideration.
What's that?
The universe naturally degrades into chaos, yet it somehow managed to generate us beings with incredibly complex nervous systems, capable of conscious thought, capable of profound empathy, and capable of understanding the concept of entropy itself.
Right.
Does that imply we are merely a random anomaly? Or does it suggest that the universe generated us to be its conscious immune system? What if your capacity for reverence isn't just an evolutionary byproduct, but the most powerful organizing force in nature, and you are its primary instrument against the dark?
We began this deep dive discussing our terrifying power to destroy. But the Manifesto reveals an equally terrifying, awe-inspiring power to preserve, to order, and to care, the power to be the counterforce. Thank you for taking this journey into the profound depths of a single paragraph with us. Keep expanding your circle.